welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging headfirst into the cosmic horror that is Warhammer 40,000's Forces of Chaos. Ever stop to think, how can pure, raw, negative emotion actually give birth to a cosmic entity? One that literally embodies war and bloodshed, ruling from a throne made of skulls. Or maybe consider this. What dark secret in the history of an ancient, super advanced race led to the literal creation of a malevolent god of pure excess? And get this, what if we told you that in this grim, dark future, a vehicle could actually go faster, not because of, superior engineering, but simply because a whole bunch of beings believed it would? Our mission today is to give you the shortcut, the real inside track to understanding the chilling, fascinating world of the Forces of Chaos. We'll unpack their power, their origins, and maybe uncover some truly mind-bending insights along the way. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's unpack this. When we talk about the Forces of Chaos, what exactly are we dealing with here? It's more than just bad guys, right?
Oh, much more, yeah. They're a major super faction, you could say. The Imperium calls them the archenemy. And it's this huge, sprawling mix of corrupted mortals and actual demonic entities from another dimension.
And right at the heart of it all, driving this whole nightmare, are the chaos gods themselves. But from what I gather, these aren't like gods you just, pray to in a temple somewhere. It's more fundamental, more visceral.
That's the really chilling part. These gods, they aren't just worshipped in the traditional sense. They are quite literally manifestations of pure negative emotion.
Mm-hmm.
They're born from the collective psychic energy, all the hate, fear, greed, despair from every single sentient life form across the entire galaxy.
And they reside in this alternate dimension, the warp. You can sort of picture it as this chaotic psychic sea, almost like a spiritual hellscape made of raw emotion. Every single act of violence, every moment of hopelessness, every single indulgence taken to the extreme, anywhere in the galaxy. It all bleeds into the warp. And that's what feeds these dark gods and empowers their demons. And here's the really counterintuitive bit, the thing that's key to understanding 40K, I think 1.00 mark. These beings aren't just powerful entities demanding worship. They are the literal embodiment of those dark emotions. They don't just ask for sacrifices. They're literally born from suffering, from bloodshed, from obsession, from decay.
That's a heavy thought. The idea that our own inner darkness could be creating literal cosmic horrors. So, okay, if they're born from emotion, who are the big four, these primary chaos gods? What aspects of, us do they represent?
Right, there are four dominant ones, each kind of mirroring a dark facet of existence. First up, you got Khorne, the blood god. He embodies pure, unadulterated rage, war, bloodshed, the archetypal warrior god, but dialed up to 11, maybe 12. He's often depicted sitting on this massive throne made entirely of skulls.
Skulls, of course.
His followers have this chant, you probably heard it, blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. It's pretty direct. His demons are these savage, bloodthirsty beasts, and his main guys among the Chaos Space Marines are the World Eaters. Think berserkers, pure blood-crazed savagery focused entirely on close combat. They actually disdain sorcery. Khorne hates psychers. It's all about brutal physical violence. They're said to get these blessings of Khorne, making them monstrously strong in melee.
Okay, so Khorne is just pure, terrifying rage. Simple, brutal. But moving on from that kind of visceral anger, the next one sounds, just deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. That would be Nurgle, the Plague Lord, the god of disease, decay, and pestilence. Picture this bloated, grotesque figure, just oozing pus, surrounded by clouds of flies, the very embodiment of entropy and decay. But here's the twist. His followers see his horrific diseases as gifts or blessings. And paradoxically, these plagues make them incredibly resilient, almost impossible to kill through conventional means.
So they're tough because they're rotting.
Pretty much. They become these slow-moving, relentless juggernauts who just spread contagion and decay wherever they go. The Death Guard Chaos Space Marine Legion is devoted to Nurgle. They're famous for their unnatural durability on the battlefield.
Okay, and the third, the Schemer.
That's Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the changer of ways. He's the god of, change, mutation, magic, sorcery, but also plotting, intrigue, deception, hope, twisted into manipulation. His demons are really bizarre, often bird-like, constantly shifting, spitting warp fire. They reflect his unpredictable, ever-changing nature. The Thousand Suns Chaos Space Marine Legion follows Tzeentch. They're masters of sorcery, heavily reliant on psychic powers, wielding arcane magic that can just devastate enemies. They tend to be more mobile, but that focus on psychic power is also a potential weakness if someone can counter it.
Right. So we've got rage, decay, and complex schemes. That leaves the fourth god. Now, I heard this one has a really unique and frankly disturbing origin story compared to the others.
You heard right. The fourth is Slaanesh, sometimes called the Prince of Pleasure or the Dark Prince. Slaanesh is the god or goddess. The form is fluid of excess and pleasure, and that means excess in all forms. Extreme pleasure, yes, but also extreme pain, sensation pushed to the absolute limit, perfectionism twisted into obsession, depravity. Anything taken too far. And here's that historical detail, the kicker that really shifts your perspective. 4.00 mark. Slaanesh wasn't always there like the others. Slaanesh was literally created by the ancient Eldar race.
Created? How?
Through their own civilization's downfall. They reached such heights of power and sophistication, they fell into utter decadence. Uncontrolled, deranged, excessive indulgence in every conceivable sensation, every emotion, pushed beyond all limits for centuries. All that intense psychic energy coalesced in the warp, and bang, a new god was born, a god reflecting that very excess. The Eldar call Slaanesh the great enemy for that reason. Its birth tore a hole in reality and doomed their empire.
Wow. An entire god born from basically a civilization partying itself to death. That's intense.
It is. And Slaanesh's followers reflect that. They seek out these ridiculous extremes. Think of the Noise Marines from the Emperor's Children, Kaon Base Marine Legion. They modify their weapons to produce deafening, psychosonic sound, finding pleasure in the agony their music inflicts.
Good grief. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If unchecked indulgence can literally birth a god like Slaanesh, what other dark reflections of our own extremes might be lurking, just waiting to manifest out there? It really drives home how emotions physically shape this universe. Okay, so beyond the gods themselves, who actually fights for them? Who are these terrifying legions and other entities pledging loyalty to these ruinous powers?
Right. The armies of the archenemy are incredibly varied. Front and center, you have the Chaos Space Marines, also called Heretic Astartes, or the Traitor Legions. These guys were once the Imperium's finest warriors, the Space Marines. But 10,000 years ago, during a massive civil war called the Horus Heresy, about half of them turned against the Emperor of Mankind.
Betrayed him, yeah.
Exactly. They threw in their lot with chaos, seeking power, immortality, forbidden knowledge. You name it. They traded their souls, basically. They're still clad in heavy power armor, wield brutal weapons, but they're twisted, mutated, and often possess potent psychic abilities drawn from the warp. We mentioned some legions dedicated to specific gods, like the World Eaters for Khorne, Death Guard for Nurgle, Thousand Sons for Tzeentch, and the Emperor's Children for Slaanesh. But there's also the Black Legion.
Ah, Abaddon's crew.
The very same. Led by Abaddon the Despoiler, they're kind of the poster boys for Chaos Undivided, serving all four gods, always aiming for total galactic conquest. Then you have the Chaos Daemons. These aren't corrupted mortals, they're beings of the warp. Pure psychic energy given form and sentience, created directly by the Chaos gods.
So literal demons.
Literal demons, yeah. They manifest in real space through cracks in reality, like the huge warp storm known as the Eye of Terror. They just pour through. And imagine the sheer terror, 2.0 mark. Picture a bloodthirster of Khorne, this enormous winged beast made of rage, wielding a colossal axe, just tearing through battle lines like paper, sprays of gore everywhere. Or think about the insidious horror of Nurglings, tiny, giggling plague bears swarming over you, spreading Nurgle's delightful gifts. It's visceral stuff.
Or those Noise Marines you mentioned, the sound itself being a weapon.
Exactly. Seeking pleasure in the sensory overload in your pain. The demons themselves are incredibly diverse, mirroring their patron. You have the huge greater demons like the Bloodthirsters, Lords of Change for Tzeentch, the great unclean ones for Nurgle, Keepers of Secrets for Slaanesh, down to lesser demons and those swarming Nurglings. One key thing is they often have this innate resilience, like the warp itself protects them, making them really hard to put down for good.
So it's not just corrupted super soldiers and literal demons. Even technology gets twisted, right? War machines.
Absolutely. You've got the Chaos Knights. These are the dark reflections of the loyalist Imperial Knights, giant piloted war machines. But these are piloted by fallen nobles, totally corrupted by chaos.
You can probably tell them apart easily.
Oh, yeah. Covered in warp-tainted symbols, twisted metal, spikes, often fleshy growths, sinister livery. They're fast for their size, incredibly tough, and they have this unique ability, sometimes called Harbingers of Dread, where their mere presence can literally terrify enemy troops, messing with their morale. And related to corrupted tech, there's the Dark Mechanicum. These are tech priests and engineers who split from the Imperium's Adeptus Mechanicus, the machine cult. They turn to chaos, seeking to fuse forbidden warp energies with technology.
Creating monstrosities, I assume.
Exactly. Demon engines, flesh metal abominations, things that defy the laws of physics and biology. While they don't have their own dedicated army list in the game currently, players often convert models to represent them, and their lore impact is huge. They're the ones building the truly horrific war machines for chaos.
And finally, what about just regular people? Humans who fall to chaos.
That's a vast number. They're often grouped under the banner of the lost and the damned. This represents the countless cultists, mutants, rogue soldiers, and ordinary citizens who've turned their backs on the Imperium and embraced chaos. They're not elite like Chaos Marines, usually. Think horde armies, overwhelming numbers of individually weaker, cheaper troops. But driven by insane fanaticism, mutation, and sheer desperation, they can still drown their enemies under a tide of bodies. A terrifying force in its own right.
That is, yeah, a truly comprehensive and horrifying collection of forces. We've really seen how negative emotions, how corruption manifests in this universe. It's bleak. But what if belief itself, maybe even unconscious belief, could also shape reality, but differently? Let's switch gears for a moment and look at another huge faction, the Orcs, because their whole deal with gods and belief is radically different from chaos, isn't it?
It really is. It's a fantastic contrast.
Right.
The Orcs, they worship two gods, Gork and Mork. Now, these aren't like the Chaos gods, born from negative emotions across the galaxy. Gork and Mork are more like raw, primal forces embodying the Orc's own nature. One is brutally cunning, and the other is cunningly brutal.
Oh, God.
And here's the absolute key difference. Unlike the Chaos gods, who actively feed on and corrupt mortal emotions, seeking to twist souls to their service, Gork and Mork don't corrupt their worshippers. They don't need to bend Orcs to their will. Orcs just are. They love fighting. They love building crude machines. They love shouting, "Wah!" They serve Gork and Mork just by being Orcs. Their god's power is constantly refreshed by every fight, every wah, because that's just what Orcs do. It's instinctive.
Right, so it's less about temptation and corruption, more just embodying the Orc way of life. But then there's the really wild part, the belief actually changing physics.
Exactly. This is where it gets fascinating. Orcs possess this latent collective psychic field. They don't use it consciously like psychers do. It's more like ambient psychic energy generated by lots of orcs being together, especially when they're excited or fighting. They call it the Wah energy. And this collective field allows their shared beliefs to literally warp reality around them.
So the classic example.
The classic example. If enough orcs believe that a vehicle painted red goes faster, then the vehicle actually goes faster. It's not just superstition. It's not just morale. Their subconscious collective psychic belief bends the laws of physics to make it true.
That's amazing.
It applies to their technology, too. Their weapons and vehicles are often incredibly crude, ramshackle things that, by all rights, shouldn't work. But they do work, because the orcs using them believe they will. Their psychic field papers over the cracks makes the impossible possible. It's like a galaxy-wide placebo effect that genuinely works.
Okay, hold on. If collective belief, even an unconscious one like the Orcs have, 7.0 mark, can literally bend reality, making crude tech function just because they think it does, what does that even imply about the nature of reality itself in Warhammer 40,000? It makes you wonder, maybe, about the power of shared belief, even in our own world, doesn't it, when enough people think something strongly enough?
It's a profound question raised by the lore, absolutely. The metaphysical implications are huge.
So, bringing this all together, this deep dive into the grim darkness, from the chaos gods born of emotion to the reality-bending belief of the Orcs, what's the core takeaway? What does it all tell us about power, corruption, and belief in this universe?
I think the deep dive really hammers home a chilling truth about the 41st millennium. Your innermost feelings, your darkest impulses, they aren't just internal struggles. They have tangible cosmic weight. They literally become fuel for unimaginably powerful, malevolent entities. The Chaos Gods aren't just villains pulling strings. They are the warp-made manifestations of collective rage, despair, obsession, decay. They're a terrifying mirror held up to the soul of the galaxy. It's a universe where emotions don't just influence reality, they actively twist and shape it. And the Orcs, in their own bizarre way, prove the flip side. Belief, even crude unconscious belief, is also a fundamental force. It makes their ramshackle tech work, makes red paint actually increase speed. So the overarching conclusion, and yeah, maybe it's a bit controversial, $10 mark, is that in Warhammer 40,000, emotion and belief aren't just sentiments. They are fundamental reality-shaping forces. This underpins everything about chaos, their existence, their power forged directly from emotion. And it explains the Orcs' bizarre effectiveness driven by collective psychic belief. It shows this deep, almost spiritual dimension woven into the fabric of the setting, far beyond typical sci-fi or fantasy tropes. The metaphysical is physical here.
Wow. Okay. So we've journeyed from the emotional birthplaces of the Chaos Gods, looked at their specific domains like Khorne's Rage and Nurgle's Decay, seen their terrifying legions like the World Eaters and Death Guard. And then pivoted to the orcs, where sheer belief literally makes things happen. It's a universe where your feelings, your convictions have real, measurable, often terrifying consequences. So, here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering that emotions are the literal fuel for the Chaos Gods, what kind of thoughts, what kind of feelings do you think are currently swirling and feeding into the warp from all the countless beings across the galaxy? And what new, unimaginable horrors might those feelings be manifesting right now, shaping the grimdark future yet to come? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the forces of chaos. We really hope this has given you that shortcut, that deeper understanding of one of Warhammer 40,000's most compelling and, terrifying elements. If you enjoyed this exploration, please do share your thoughts with us on social media. Subscribe to the deep dive so you don't miss future insights, and maybe leave us a review. It really helps us keep digging into these fascinating worlds. Until next time, stay curious.